why did the Steelers finish 0-5? What's your estimation as to why a team that was so promising, 4-2 under Fields, and then 6-1 under Russell Wilson to make him 10-3, finished 10-8?
Well, Rich, part of it was the competition, and that's no excuse. That's the reality. And the reality of that is when you play the Eagles and the Ravens and the Chiefs, the Steelers aren't good enough to just line up and beat those guys. They're a turnover-reliant team. Mike Tomlin, throughout the season, he doesn't use that exact expression, but he talks and laments the lack of turnovers, the lack of missed opportunities. And you do that when you're just not able to stand up and play with the big boys. And that's been the biggest thing. The other thing, the defense has been a terrible disappointment in this stretch. You allow 299 yards to the Ravens in the postseason. And, Rich, I hark back to the days of James Farrior and Casey Hampton and Brett Kiesel. If Derrick Henry ran for 162 yards 3 weeks later against those guys, he'd be lucky to get 30. Because their purpose would be, he ain't going to do that to us again. And what does he do? He comes back with 186. To me, that's unconscionable. I don't know how that happens, but I think that's just, somewhat kind of symptomatic and emblematic of what's happened with the defense here in the second half of the season. And their inability to stop the run, their defensive line has been exposed. Thank goodness they have Cam Hayward. And that is the number one unit on this team, Rich, that has to be, revamped and rebuilt.
Well, I got number 92, Gerry. You know what I mean? Or I should say number 90 as well. So it's interesting you go defense, because I'm sure most Steeler fans would say offensively they disappeared. Russ disappeared. The quarterback room wasn't good enough at the end of the day, Gerry.
Yeah, Rich, I'm not letting them off the hook either because they failed to score more than 17 points for the last 5 games. You have to go back to Chuck Noll's first season to find an instance where they failed to score more than 17 points in 5 straight games. And so, yeah, I'm certainly not letting them off the hook. They have, despite the fact they want to run the ball, it does not control the game. And I'm not going to let Russell Wilson off the hook, but I will tell you, the offensive line, I think the injuries finally caught up with them. You're starting 2 rookies, and while Zach Frazier's been outstanding, I don't want to say they hit the rookie wall, but they had issues with protection. And of course, the other thing too, Rich, their wide receiver room was it just showed up what they feared all year, and as they don't have anybody beside George Pickens, and they don't have anybody who can get open in the middle of the field. And you add all those things together, and you saw a disconnect in the passing game for sure, and the offense as a whole.
All right, so then let's get to the larger picture then, Gerry Dulac. How is everything that you just laid out landing in the house of the Rooneys?
Well, I'm sure it's not landing very well. I will tell you, Rich, only because you mentioned this at the start and everybody wants to know, but I think, I kind of laid that to rest on Monday. The Steelers have no plans to move on from Mike Tomlin. Look, they gave him a 3-year, $50 million extension in June, and they're not just going to walk away from that. And when they did that, that was just another indication that Mike Tomlin and the Steelers will part ways only when Mike Tomlin wants to. And the Steelers apparently and obviously just aren't going to do that. So for those people, especially around here, Rich, I'm sure you hear it nationally, but locally, it's the cries among the fan base. It's time to move on. It's time to get away from Mike Tomlin. Well, that's not going to happen. This idea that the Steelers would trade him, Rich, you and I have a better opportunity to be the Steelers head coach than the Steelers ever trading Mike Tomlin. That's not going to happen either. But when you look at all the moves they made in the offseason, after Art Rooney II issued that declaration that it's, quote, time to start winning playoff games. And now what? That's why you brought in Russell Wilson. That's why you gave Patrick Queen the biggest free agent contract you've ever done. That's why they moved on from Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson, 2 starters, made a trade for Justin Fields. All the moves they made were designed to, hey, let's at least win a playoff game and see if we can't get this back on track. And not only are they right back where they were last year, Rich, to me, they're farther back than where they were last year.
So then what do they do, Gerry?
Good question, Rich. This is the 3rd year out of 4 that they are going into the offseason with, uncertainty at quarterback. And, I think you've heard me say when we've talked before that when Russell Wilson and the Steelers agreed on a contract in the spring, that the intention on both sides was to do a longer term deal. Now, I don't know how that's going to play out now. I don't know if the same feeling exists among the Steelers. You have two running backs who aren't under contract, and I doubt both of them will be back. And if I had to bet, I'm going to guess, despite 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, they might have to move on from Najee Harris. They can put the franchise tag on him, and that's going to cost them $13 to $14 million. I don't think they want to do that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of questions here that need to be answered. And of course, the big one is going to start at quarterback. But they to say they have to revamp everything. The problem is they brought in a lot of veterans last year. You don't want to keep doing that, Rich, because all of a sudden your roster gets older. And a lot of their backups are older. They don't have a dynamic person they can bring off the bench, both offensively and defensively, that you think, okay, this guy's going to be good in 2025 and maybe a Pro Bowler in 2026. They don't have that kind of guy, especially on offense. And so they need to go find a running back who could get to the edge. And I think you will see them in free agency make some kind of deal or sign a player in free agency, a number 2 receiver, or eventually who will be number 1, like they tried during the regular season and failed.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.